In the golden sands of the Arabian desert, under the blistering sun, a caravan came to a halt. The men, women, and children were weary. Their leader, Imam Hussain, stood tall, his eyes scanning the horizon. He knew where they were, Karbala. The land was dry and silent, yet it was here that one of history's most defining stands for truth and justice would unfold. Imam Hussain was the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad, beloved by all who knew him. Known for his kindness, wisdom, and unwavering sense of justice, he had inherited not only the Prophet's blood, but also his mission to uphold truth. At the time, a ruler named Yazid had claimed the caliphate, ruling with arrogance, injustice, and oppression. He sought to force Hussein into allegiance, knowing that if Hussein gave his support, it would legitimize his corrupt rule. But Hussein knew he could not betray the values of his grandfather. When messengers came demanding Hussein's pledge to Yazid, he refused. "A man like me," he said, "cannot give allegiance to a man like Yazid." This was not just a political decision, it was a moral stand. Hussein knew what was at stake. He knew that refusing Yazid meant risking his life, the lives of his family, and all those who stood by him. But truth meant more to him than comfort or survival. With only a small group of companions and family members, 72 in total, Hussein traveled from Medina to Mecca, and then toward Kufa, where people had written to him, promising their support. But Yazid's army intercepted him before he could reach them. In the barren plains of Karbala, Hussein and his caravan were surrounded by thousands of soldiers. The enemy cut off their access to the Euphrates River, leaving them without water for days under the burning sun. Despite the suffering, Hussein did not waver. On the 10th of Muharram, known as Ashura, the battle began. One by one, his companions fell, friends, brothers, nephews, even his 6-month-old son, Ali Asghar. Yet he did not surrender. Even in the face of such overwhelming cruelty, Hussein stood with grace, dignity, and faith. He fought not for power, but for a principle that oppression must never be accepted, and justice must be upheld, no matter the cost. When he was finally struck down, alone on the battlefield, the world seemed to pause. His sacrifice did not end with his death. It lit a fire in the hearts of generations to come. Even today, people remember Imam Hussain not just for how he died, but for how he lived with honor, courage, and a deep love for justice. Through his sacrifice, he taught the world that true victory lies not in might, but in standing for what is right. His stand in Karbala remains a timeless lesson that even in the darkest moments, a single voice of truth can echo across centuries. The city of Medina was quiet that night, though the news had begun to spread like wildfire. Yazid had assumed power in Damascus, and he had only one demand for his rule to be solidified: the allegiance of Imam Hussain, the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad. Inside his modest home, Hussein sat with his family, deep in thought. His brother's children played in the courtyard, unaware of the storm brewing beyond the city walls. The time had come to make a decision, one that would determine not just his future, but the future of truth itself. A messenger arrived at dawn. His face was pale, his robes dusty from travel. He brought the command from the governor of Medina, under Yazid's authority: swear allegiance to Yazid, or face the consequences. Hussein read the letter in silence, then calmly folded it. "Tell your master," he said gently, "that I will never pledge allegiance to a tyrant." The messenger stared at him in disbelief. "But if you resist, they will come for you. They will come for your family." "I know," Hussein said, his voice calm, yet firm. "But if I remain silent, who will speak for the truth?" If I give in to injustice, what example do I leave for the Ummah? Word spread quickly. Some urged him to stay and fight for Medina. Others suggested he hide. But Hussein knew this wasn't just a matter of politics, it was a test of principle. Yazid's rule was not just unjust, it was dangerous to the very soul of Islam. His rule normalized corruption, cruelty, and the twisting of religious authority to serve power. Hussein chose to leave Medina. He took his family and a few loyal companions and headed toward Mecca, hoping to avoid bloodshed. But even there, danger followed. Yazid sent assassins to kill him, even in the holy sanctuary. It was then Hussein made another painful choice to leave Mecca before Hajj, heading toward Kufa, where letters of support had come from the people who promised to stand by him. But the promises did not hold. As Hussein traveled, Yazid's forces tightened around him. His path was blocked, his supporters were threatened or silenced. Eventually, he and his small caravan were stopped in the scorching plains of Karbala. It would have been easier to surrender, to agree to Yazid's terms, save his family, and live. But Hussein's heart refused what his soul could not accept. Death with dignity is better than a life of humiliation. He stood for justice not because it was easy, but because it was right. His refusal was not rebellion, it was resistance to moral decay. He chose to die on his feet rather than live on his knees. His courage was not in his sword, but in his conviction. That refusal, simple but profound, changed history. In saying no to Yazid, Hussein said yes to every person who would ever face oppression. His decision echoed far beyond Karbala, beyond centuries. It became a beacon for the oppressed, a call to conscience that still stirs hearts today. Imam Hussein's refusal was not an act of defiance, it was an act of devotion. Devotion to truth, devotion to justice, and devotion to God. The sun blazed fiercely over the desert of Karbala. Dust and silence hung in the air like a heavy cloak. It was the 10th day of Muharram. The Euphrates River shimmered in the distance, yet not a single drop of water had touched the lips of Hussein's family in 3 days. In the center of the camp, Imam Hussain stood surrounded by the few who remained, his sons, brothers, nephews, and loyal companions. They were only 72 against an army of thousands. The odds were clear, but none of them wavered. Imam Hussain looked at the faces before him. Each one was ready to sacrifice everything for a cause they believed in, justice, truth, and the defense of faith. He raised his eyes to the heavens and whispered a prayer, "O Allah, I leave this cause in your hands." As the morning light crept across the land, the battle began. First went the companions, men of faith and honor, who fought bravely despite the overwhelming numbers. Each time one fell, the camp grew quieter, but not weaker. Their spirits only rose higher. Ali Akbar, Hussein's beloved teenage son, stepped forward. He resembled the Prophet in looks and character. Hussein hesitated, his heart torn, but nodded. "Go, my son." Ali Akbar charged into battle with unmatched courage. From the enemy camp, even the harshest soldiers wept at his beauty and bravery. He was struck down brutally. Hussein ran to him, held his lifeless body, and whispered, "My son, now you have found peace. May Allah be with you." The camp watched in sorrow but with strength. Next came Abbas, the brother of Hussein, known as Alamdar, the flag-bearer. Loyal, fierce, and deeply loved, Abbas was the heart of the camp's hope. Knowing the children were thirsty, he asked permission to fetch water. Hussein granted it, his eyes filled with tears. Abbas rowed bravely, reached the river, and filled his water bag. But as he returned, he was ambushed. His arms were severed, and the water never reached the camp. Even in his final breaths, Abbas did not call for help. He called only for his brother. When Hussein found him lying by the river, he cried, "Now my back is broken, O Abbas." He gently closed his brother's eyes and carried his flag back, now soaked with grief. As the sun reached its peak, only Hussein remained. His 6-month-old son, Ali Asghar, was still alive in the camp, crying from thirst. Hussein took him in his arms and approached the enemy lines. He did not ask for mercy for himself, but for water for the baby. "Have we no humanity left?" he pleaded. A soldier answered, not with water but with an arrow. It pierced the infant's throat in his father's arms. Hussein looked to the sky, holding his baby's body, and said, "O Allah, accept this sacrifice." By afternoon, the earth of Karbala was stained with blood. The family of the Prophet lay martyred, their bodies lifeless, but their souls eternal. When Hussein finally fell, alone and exhausted, he did so in complete surrender to God. He had lost everything, yet he remained undefeated. Because what he protected, truth, justice, and faith, could not be taken by swords. The sacrifice of Karbala was not just a battle. It was a message. It was Hussein's silent cry to the world, "Stand for what is right, even if you must stand alone." And that cry still echoes from the sands of Karbala to every heart that remembers. The streets of the old city were filled with the sounds of drums, soft sobs and rhythmic chants. Black flags fluttered above narrow alleyways, and groups of people, young and old, walked slowly in processions. It was the month of Muharram, and the city had entered a time of mourning. 12-year-old Zayn walked beside his father, wearing a black kurta. He had attended Majlis gatherings every Muharram for as long as he could remember. But this year, something felt different. He was older now, beginning to understand that what was being mourned was not just a past event, but something deeply alive. "Baba," he asked, tugging on his father's sleeve, "why do we cry every year? Isn't it enough to remember what happened once?" His father looked down at him gently, placing a hand on Zayn's shoulder. "We don't cry just to feel sad," he said. "We cry to remember why Hussein stood up, and to remind ourselves that we must carry that message forward." That evening, they sat in the dimly lit hall of the mosque. The speaker's voice echoed through the room as he told the story of Karbala, how Imam Hussain refused to bow to tyranny, how he and his companions endured thirst and suffering, how even the children, like baby Ali Asghar, became martyrs in the cause of truth. Tears streamed down the faces of those gathered, not out of helpless grief, but out of love, pain, and deep connection to a cause that still resonated. Zayn watched as his father cried. He looked around and saw people from all walks of life, doctors, laborers, students, all mourning together. It struck him how powerful this grief was, how it brought people together in purpose. After the majlis, Zayn asked the speaker a question. "What does Imam Hussain want from us now, after all this time?" The speaker smiled gently. "He wants what he always wanted, for people to wake up, to see injustice and not ignore it, to defend the truth even when it's hard. That's why we remember him, not just with our tears, but with our actions." Zayn went home that night thoughtful. He opened his notebook and began writing. He wrote about injustice he saw at school, about the classmate who was bullied, about how others stayed silent. He wrote about how he too had looked away. But he didn't want to be silent anymore. The next day at school, he sat next to the boy who was usually alone. "You can sit with us," Zayn said with a quiet smile. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was the beginning of change. As Muharram continued, Zayn began to see the majlis and processions in a new light. They were not just rituals, they were reminders. Every tear was a promise. a promise to stand up, a promise to live like Hussain. And so, mourning became more than sorrow, it became strength. A strength passed from one heart to another, year after year. In remembering the pain of Karbala, people found purpose. In the tragedy, they found the courage to change themselves and the world. Because Hussein's message was never meant to stay in history books. It was meant to live in people's hearts and in their choices. The sun was setting behind the village rooftops, casting a golden glow on the courtyard where little Aliyah sat, her legs folded beneath her. She was only 8, her eyes wide with curiosity and her small hands fidgeting with the black ribbon her mother had tied around her wrist for Muharram. In front of her sat her grandmother, Nana Jan, a gentle woman whose voice carried the warmth of 100 stories. It was the 9th night of Muharram, and every corner of their home was quiet, in reflection. The village loudspeakers played soft nahars in the distance, and the flickering candlelight danced on the walls. Nana Jan, Ali asked, "Why do we wear black this month? Why does everyone cry so much?" Her grandmother smiled and patted the space beside her. "Come sit closer, my dear. It's time you heard about someone very special. His name was Hussain." Aliyah leaned in, ready for one of her grandmother's beloved tales. "Long ago," Nana Jan began, "there lived a man who was loved by all because he stood for truth. He was the grandson of our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his name was Imam Hussain. He was kind, brave, and never afraid to stand up for what was right, even if it meant facing danger." She spoke of the desert of Karbala, of the scorching heat, the dry lips of thirsty children, and the army of Yazid that outnumbered Hussein's small group. Aliyah listened, her heart swelling with both sadness and awe. She couldn't imagine standing in a desert without water, much less knowing that people wanted to hurt you. "But why didn't Imam Hussain run away?" she asked softly. "Because, my love," Nana Jan said, "he was not just fighting with swords, he was fighting with values. He wanted the world to know that even when everything is against you, you must still stand for justice, for honesty, and for kindness. That's what makes a person truly great." The old woman paused, brushing Aliyah's hair gently from her face. "You see, every year during Muharram, we tell this story. We cry not only for the pain Hussain and his family went through, but also to remind ourselves never to forget why he did what he did." Aliyah was quiet, thinking, "Will I get to tell the story too when I grow up?" "Yes," Nana Jan said, her eyes moist. "That is how it lives on. From my grandmother to me, from me to your mother, and now to you. The story is not just something we hear, it's something we live. When you speak kindly, help others, and stand up for someone being treated unfairly, you're walking the path of Hussain." Aliyah looked at her grandmother and smiled. "I'll never forget. I promise." Later that night, as they joined the village majlis, Aliyah stood quietly among the rows of mourners, her small hands folded, her eyes closed in thought. The words of lamentation surrounded her, but her heart held something even deeper, a promise to keep the story alive. In the stillness of the night, under the same stars that once shone over Karbala, another child had taken her first step on the path of remembrance. The legacy continued, not only in books and lectures, but in the hearts of those who loved Hussain, not just with tears, but with action. Ask ChatGPT.